Hello, this is Denver Riddle from Color Grading Central. Continuing with our looks building stage, in this tutorial, we'll be covering how to suggest different times of the day using DaVinci Resolve. This is a requirement you may sometimes face from either the screenplay or the director, where a scene is supposed to take place at a certain time of the day, but in fact, principal photography might have taken place at a different time. In this tutorial, we'll suggest 4 common times of the day, starting with midday, golden hour just before sunset, twilight just after sunset, and finishing with a quick and easy day for night. Suggesting different times of the day works under the principle of color temperature, or in other words, the color of light. Throughout the day, the color temperature of sunlight changes. In this chart, for example, you can see that the color temperature at sunrise is about 2000 Kelvin and at midday about 5500 Kelvin. Since color temperature appears to affect the tonal range in a top-down fashion, starting in the highlights and ending in the shadows, we can suggest different times of the day using a highlights adjustment to match the color temperature of the sunlight. So let's get started. In the example we'll be using, color correction has already been performed in the first node. We'll add a second node where we can begin creating our look. Let's first begin with suggesting midday. As midday has the highest contrast of the day, we'll imitate this by creating a high key look. If you recall from one of the previous tutorials, to create a high key look, we'll bring up our midtones, being careful not to blow out the highlights, and then lower the shadows to create that punchy contrast. The color temperature on a clear midday is about 5500 K, so our whites for the most part should balance, but most monitors are calibrated at 6500 K, so we might coax a negligible amount of warmth into the highlights to reflect this. Okay, and here's the before and after. Let's move on. Let's create a new version, reset the second node, and now let's suggest a golden hour look, which is around the time just before the sun sets. Because the sun is more directional to the horizon, I'll duplicate this as though the sunlight is coming in through the windshield. Our highlights should look pretty hot, so I'll bring them up. And I'm not worried about clipping them a little bit.
Now for the midtones and shadows, I'll leave them where they're at, but I do want to increase the contrast with the contrast control to give us that harsh light of the sun pouring in through the windshield.
Now for the color temperature, sunlight is quite warm during golden hour, so I'll push some warmth into the highlights. And I'll counteract this action just a little bit in the midtones so that my skin tones don't become too warm. Now as a final touch, I'll push a little bit of blue into the shadows, since the shadows are illuminated by the sky, giving them a blue color cast. And for the before and after, pretty cool technique. And for twilight, the time of day after the sun dips below the horizon, oops, I need to create a new version first, and reset the node. Okay, after the sun drops below the horizon, it immediately gets a little bit darker, and the source of lighting, which is the sky, puts off a really cool color temperature. So to create this look, I'll lower the midtones a little bit. And I want to keep my dynamic range in the highlights. And then I'll push some blue into the highlights. And that's it. Pretty easy look to create. Finally, for our day for night look, I'll share with you a quick and easy way to accomplish it for now, and share with you more advanced techniques to doing it in a future tutorial. So I'll need to create a new version, but instead of resetting it this time, I'll continue with the twilight look that we've already created. I'll begin by lowering the midtones a lot, and the highlights just a little bit. Now, I'm not too concerned that we're losing detail in the shadows, as this is part of the day for night look, but I do need to address the saturation. So I'll lower the saturation as colors are really muted when it's dark. And you can see in the process that we also lost some of the blue. So I'll add another serial node and push a little bit of blue into the midtones. And voila! a quick and easy way to do the day for night look. Let's review. Toggling through the previous versions, you can see that we suggested a midday look, a golden hour look, a twilight look, and a day for night look. Understanding how contrast and color temperatures affected at these different times of the day will help us to create the appropriate look that's called for. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching.